better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll those dice. Man, life's so
Hey, Rob.
Hello, Matt.
Yeah. I was wondering, have you ever tried to imagine or wondered what it's like to live in the heart of a grasping, belligerent, possibly dying, corrupt empire?
No, but I was thinking, what would it be like to live in a place where all of your culture is like endlessly self-referential, where everything is sort of like returning back on itself, kind of just like regurgitated memes and impressions, just constantly building upon one another circularly, and until you have just sort of like a fetid cesspool of culture that has not progressed or grown. And
Yeah.
what would that be like? I don't know.
Rob and I will never know, but listeners, we can imagine through the written word, through fiction. That's right. It's another Dungeon Master of None book club episode.
That's right. Hello, everyone. We are talking about, well, we're talking about a lot of things, but we are talking about the books, the duology of Arkady Martine, which are a memory called Empire
and a desolation called Peace.
And a desolation called Peace. Two real banger titles for two banger books. And these are very much Matt and Rob books. You're going to find out as we talk about them. But I think that they're great books and worth reading, especially if you are interested in either science fiction or fantasy or world building. I think they have a lot to do. I think a lot to learn from, and they're very nuanced. One of them won a Hugo, not both, but A Memory Called Empire did. And if you have not read them, they come highly recommended by us.
If you want to find out nothing else about the author or the book or what you can learn from it as a Dungeon Master, just know that it has the Dungeon Master of None seal of approval. These books are amazing. I think it's taken us a long time to get a real good sci-fi on our book club list, a real good space opera. And if you like sci-fi, if you like smart speculative fiction, if you like space opera, if you like history, you will. If you like world building, you'll like all of both of these books. So Arkady Martine's Teixcalaan Duology. Oh, by the way, do you like saying hard words?
We're going to have to say this. Teixcalaan, I think, is how we're going to say it.
Teixcalaan. How's your Nahuatl?
Not very good, actually. There's a lot of great words in Nahuatl, but I don't. They're hard to say. They do not roll off of my gringo tongue very well.
Well, you know some of them already, right? Like guacamole and achuatl. Like those little lizard guys, those little salamander things.
Axolotls.
Axolotl.
That's right. Sorry.
Okay, I'm still probably saying that wrong. Anyway,
the little salamander guys with the fringes. Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, we know there are more than a few lone Nahuatl words. Actually, so this let's talk about what we're talking about, Matt, because
So in case our listeners want to follow along, I think let's start with the first book, so we don't spoil everything. If you're okay,
sure,
I want to hear about the first book a little bit, maybe then I'll turn the podcast off and read it. If you've already read both, chug along through the whole thing. The first book, A Memory Called Empire. Here's the basic idea. There's a diplomat from a space station dwelling culture on the edge of a vast interstellar empire. You add all your tropes about interstellar empires from Asimov to Lucas, and it's got some of those. Has to go navigate the imperial capital, figure out who murdered her predecessor, and maybe stop the empire from just overrunning her much smaller station. That's the plot, and let's get into it.
So the big picture is pretty familiar, right? And you may be saying to yourself, if you haven't read this, what's the big deal? Why do I care about this? And there's a number of reasons why these books stand out and why they're notable. A big part of it is just generally the big brain that Arkady Martine brings to the books. She is a scholar of the Byzantine Empire. She speaks like 5 languages or something, like 6 languages, and it shows. It is demonstrable that this is a book written by a very smart academic that comes with upsides and downsides, but it distinguishes them.
It'll make you feel a little stupid.
Make you feel a little stupid, and at times it can be a little
lazy,
a little up its own ass, but not in a bad way. But it
No.
is. This is a smart person book written by a smart person for smart people, and you may feel dumb. That's okay. Go into it with a beginner's mind. Open yourself up to a little humility, and it'll be fine. But
This reminds me, Rob. Before the show, we were talking about the author of this duology, Arkady Martine, aka Anna Linden Weller, who is widely published in like the best journals on classical and medieval Byzantine and Armenian history, but also speaks 6 languages, but also is a city planner, but also is a poetry writer. It was one of Hugo, has a cool wife, lives in the mountains, and is a clean energy consultant.
Yeah.
She basically has the job of every person I know, or the dream job of every person I know. And none of my friends have any of those jobs,
right?
And she has all of them.
She took all the jobs that we wanted. Anyway,
what we're saying is she's a cool, smart person.
Unfortunately, it appears that she deserves this. Like, she's the kind of person you love to hate, I guess, or hate to love, because she really is like that good. She really is like very smart. She writes in a number of different disciplines, like Matt said. She's published academically. She's a fiction writer. I've read a couple.
Rob
of,
and I both love the Mongol Empire. We read an article of hers about like the Byzantine women marrying into like upper echelons of the Golden Horde, and we're like, oh my god, this is really good. Holy shit!
It was fantastically well researched. It was really interesting. She wrote a great essay for Uncanny Magazine in like 2020 about city planning, and resilience and surviving the apocalypse. It's great. I'll link it. It's something I kind of return to from time to time when I'm feeling like especially doomerish about the world, because it is kind of an anti-doomer piece. But the way that this shows up in the Teixcalaan Duology is the empire itself is so. Yes. Like Matt said, the big picture is pretty familiar. It's sci-fi, gigantic, galaxy-spanning empire, but it's not, Star Wars, the Empire. It's not Foundation's Empire. It's much more nuanced. Martine has put a lot of detail into things like culture and language and diplomacy. There's a great deal of Teixcalaan poetry and art and interpersonal relationships, very subtle things. So if you are interested in, if you always wondered what types of, holovids they watched in the, Imperial Galactic Core, like I did, this is the book for you, right? She goes into great detail about, the type of music they listen to and their entertainment and like what they write on. Like this is nerd stuff, but if you are into it, it's great.
This is also the best type of world building, and like this is done while there's a breakneck mystery / sometimes heist, sometimes scheme, sometimes noir investigation going on that just doesn't stop. So unlike reading, I don't know, your Tolkien or something, there's never like a one chapter aside about poetry. It's there. You're absorbing it, and
it's
it
woven
makes it
in.
It's I couldn't put this book down. You'll keep just going.
I think that there are it has peaks and valleys, but I also couldn't put either of these books down, and I think that I'll lay my cards on the table here. I think this works especially well as a duology if you read both books. I think that the first one stands alone just fine, but I think the second one really brings it home in a way that I think improves the whole. But even so, this is not it's not a bunch of tedious asides on things you don't care about. It is, the poetry is relevant to the plot as it happens. The culture is significant to things that are happening, the deep intrigue and machinations and scheming that are occurring on every single page. It's very cool. It's very, again, I at this stage in my life, and my enjoyment of science fiction and fantasy, I want to know about this stuff. I want to, yes, I want cool space battles, but also I want to know about the art and the poetry. I want to know about the people. Tell me a little bit more about like what's going on here.
It's crazy that this book is doing this like insane world building that it feels like only someone who speaks 6 languages and has a PhD in history and city planning could do. But it is still a space opera. There's people from different parts of space, and they all have different goals, and then there's big drama, and then the fate of the stars is in the hands of a few.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. It's like weren't like a bunch of crazy people mad about the Hugo Awards not doing space opera again, because like this is like fucking space opera.
Yeah, well, the Sad Puppies, he went through a whole thing because their have gun will travel guys weren't winning Hugos anymore. But I can name like a half a dozen space operas, like Anne Leckie's Ancillary Justice won, the Terra Ignata series won, this one won. Like, yes, there are women in them. There are gay people in them. Sometimes they discuss feelings. There are still guns and spaceships and space opera and planets and interstellar travel. You just, those guys just don't like the other stuff. It's not that there's not enough guns. It's just like they don't want women to have guns. It's very silly. I was recently exposed to some of this again, and I was like, God, this is even stupider. 8 years down the line.
Yeah, we'll continue on and continue to get stupider. This book, however, I think now that we're maybe through, we really haven't spoiled anything yet.
Yeah.
We can talk about the book in detail. You can tune out if you haven't read it yet and want to.
Yeah. I do want to say I liked A Memory Called Empire. A valid criticism of the first book is that, technically, not a lot happens. Now, if you are the type of person who can, enjoy a little bit of scheming and intrigue, it's a very compelling book. There's honestly like a propulsive mystery at the heart of it, which is, and this is one of the really cool things that we're going to talk about. The main character, Mahit,
yeah,
we'll say Mahit, comes from a space station, and the sort of unique. The competitive advantage of
is it Space Armenia?
Is Space Armenia. Lassell, we'll call I think Lassell. A lot of these words I have not said out loud before. Is that they have this imago device, and the imago device allows you to implant, absorb, have the memories of someone. Of an ancestor in your head.
Not necessarily an ancestor, just someone from the station.
Not necessarily an ancestor, just anybody, but it is often tied to bloodlines. Anyway, the point is you can learn from directly your predecessors. This allows for excellent transmission of knowledge and expertise. And in the case of our protagonist, Mahit, she is to be an ambassador. And so the imago is of the previous ambassador, but here's the twist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the exciting thing, and it is actually like a pretty this is a great like sci-fi premise because it doesn't require like a ton of like techno babble, and it's just like a cool idea that is only possible in science fiction. But he's been murdered, and so the imago that she has is 15 years out of date. She doesn't have any of like the recent knowledge of Iskander, and that creates some like really interesting and exciting tensions.
Yeah, the imago device is so cool. So many games and other things have something like this, like the Trill from Star Trek, or I believe there's a species or an ancestry in Pathfinder where you get something like this, and it's a super fun way to make a character or an NPC where they're an amalgamation, but it is kind of a pretty hard sci-fi. The imago device, like they get into, okay, like you have memories, and then it also like taps into your endocrine system, and that's what your personality is, memories plus like your endocrine system, and It gets into both. And that when people who have new imagos, it's like they're having a conversation with them. And then later in life, it just fades into the background of your being, like if it was your own memory, right? And these devices are incredibly precious. Maybe there's like hints they were developed to help pilots like navigate tricky things that are hard to do, but have become this part of this Lascelles Station spacer culture, which has led to it in some ways being a little more stagnant than other places. But I mean, we still see tons of innovation and new things coming out of this culture.
Yeah, you find out in the second book a little bit more about Lascelles Station and about the imagos, but it's an interesting idea, and it's, yeah, like Matt said, there's a suggestion that it's for pilots, but you know, it does mean that a lot of the highly technical things that are involved in running a space station, which is an inhospitable thing, right? Keeping something like that running in deep space requires a lot of technical expertise, and so the imago kind of like makes sense as a thing to develop there. But our heroine Mahit is really interesting because she's basically like a Teixcalaan boo. She's an enthusiast of Teixcalaan culture, which is very useful as an ambassador, and also like necessary to sort of like play the like deep intrigue games and understand like what's being said on the second layer of this poetry reading. But at the same time, it like isolates her from her home culture. She's not like a pariah or anything, but it's clear that like she is eager to, you know, join the real like cultural civilizational center and not be on her, you know, dinky little backwater anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we were joking about this at the beginning, you know, what's it like to be in an empire. And, you know, Rob and I are both from a very large empire that has a lot of cultural pull and does a lot of wars, just like Teixcalaan. But, you know, it's also like a universal feeling. Anyone who's grown up in a small town, like, feels that pull. And Lascelles a small station to, like, something bigger and larger where, like, more, you feel like more beautiful or exciting things are happening, and produces more works of art and culture and excitement. And yeah, that's our protagonist. Yeah, she's a weeaboo for the Space Mexica Empire.
Yeah, and this is the cool thing, right? In case you've been picking up on like the words, the like language and some of the trappings of Teixcalaan is very like Mexica, very Nahuatl. They have a ball game, like a ball in a hoop game, which is sick. But the structure and sort of like political underpinnings, these are very like Byzantine, right? There's
people love poetry and flowers.
The royal court where they do, you know, poetry competitions, and there's lots of scheming viziers and a very like creaky and ancient bureaucracy and like royal system. This is very like mid-late Byzantine, and it shows. But this is a very smart way to create like fantasy or science fiction cultures, is take two big ideas and like mash them together, and then you'll get, you know, do more than that. And there's definitely like a lot more nuance here than that, but like the naming conventions, a lot of the trappings are very Mexica, but then the Martine's expertise with the Byzantines shines through for sure.
Right. And like, if you're not catching up on the parallels, right, Lascelles Station, where our protagonist from, is, you know, it's space Armenia. It's between, like Armenia was for a lot of the classical and medieval period, between two or three great empires, negotiating and dealing with all of them. I think like for world building, the two big ideas smashed together are perfect. And then as long as you don't just stick to that formula, because that's not what Martine does either. Like, there's the cultural pull of the United States. It's very clear that the military has a little bit of like the Mongol Empire. Like, there's the sworn band of the emperor, right? And yeah, but then it's and then there's also a lot of like city planning and AI in the thing.
That's right.
But yeah, so just keep throwing other things you find cool, and at the end of it, people who are paying attention will be like, oh, Byzantine politics, Mexica like language, okay, I get this. People will notice it, but they'll still be impressed. And the people who don't care about that at your table will just be like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah. This is, again, this is really like fantastic world building, because like that's just the start of it. And I think what Martine does well is that, you know, she actually has like characters through which she explores this culture and these cultures and their relationship to each other. There's our protagonist. There's her interpreter / guide, Three Seagrass. There's the young heir to the Emperor. 9 antidote. Sorry,
eight antidote.
8 antidote.
And then the Emperor himself, 6 direction.
6 direction. As you can tell, Teixcalaan names are usually a number and a sort of like an object, but then they all have pet names or like secret names or like, you know, intimate names, which are fun. You know, they call the heir Cure. They call Three Seagrass. What do they call her?
Reed.
Reed. That's right. This is cute. This is clever. This is a small thing, but like very. Again, this is very like rich world building to me. This is smart, good stuff.
Yeah, I feel like this is also stolen from something. I think
almost definitely
like old Toltecs maybe. It's one of the
so.
Central American pre Mexica civilization. What's your Teixcalaan name, Rob? Let's see. Your
do you have a generator?
Yes, I do. What month is your birthday in? Why
August. It's the
October.
8th.
August. Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite architectural feature?
It's a flying buttress, probably.
Yeah. I'm gonna call you Two Buttress because you got
I like that.
Two Buttress.
That's good. I can work with that. Yeah. That's a good name.
So no, the naming conventions also, like, if your players have not read this book, or even if they have, because again, it's based on a real historical thing. Like using numbers for names, especially of people who are not robots, is great. It's like people like numbers, right? They have some kind of symbolic, maybe magic, maybe attachment to a number, and it's easy to come up with a random name. If they're not, okay, hey, I'm 63. Nice to meet you.
It's a really good, just for coming up with like quick names. So it's sort of hard to talk about and like what happens in the first book. The second book is a little bit easier, but there's the central mystery, right? Like what happened to Iskander. And then you start to pick up on there's scheming, there's intrigue, there's power plays happening behind the scenes. And I would say like maybe if I have a criticism of the first book, and to be clear, I have criticisms of everything. I think this book can get away with just about it could be way worse, and I would still recommend it because it's such. I love ideas, and there's like so many cool ideas. I found it thrilling to read, but
it's also just written well.
It's written well, but it is a bit goofy looking back that Mahit doesn't have like a single like assistant from her home station. Like apparently there are people there and like nobody is there talking to her. Like she doesn't have any staff. She's an ambassador without staff. I guess if I'm being generous, like that's the role that her Mago is supposed to play, but you still should have like a secretary or something. Anyway,
I think it has to do with the
constantly confused, which
right.
is
a little bit is like she's smart and capable, so she figures it out. And the figuring out helps us tell the story. My world building justification is LaSalle Station has like 30,000 people, which should not be enough people for a culture to exist when there's hungry states, on its doorstep.
Which is totally valid. The other thing is that I'm willing to forgive, and if you read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, like I do, there's a major problem which no author has like fully managed to overcome, which is how do you world build without saying, well, as you know, Mahit, in the Teixcalaan Empire, we do blah, 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 blah. You do that by, the best way to do that is by having like an outsider, like a naive, newcomer, so that it makes sense for them to ask questions about like how things work and like not understand basic science fiction concepts so that they can be explained to them. So I'm very willing to overlook this thing. It's one of those things where like, it's not exactly like it's not an idiot plot, right? Where it only works because everyone's an idiot, but it only works because Mahi doesn't have like information that an ambassador absolutely should have. But there are good reasons for that.
Well, spoilers for the first 15 pages. Her imago has been sabotaged. One of the like random things this reminds me of is and is a great DM advice is, okay, let's say you want to set a campaign that's between two polities, right? An empire in the smaller kingdom, or two empires, is, as long as you give a couple factions in each side like actions they're taking, right? It makes things interesting, right? It's way more interesting that there are people, even they might claim they're not schemers, right? But everyone schemes, right? If you're a human being, everyone's scheming. LaSalle Station is scheming too. They just don't, wear it on their sleeves like the Teixcalaan League do.
One of the really interesting things about this series to me, which I really enjoyed, is something that is just sort of like a curiosity to me. Like, how do you if you're Armenia or like Singapore or something, like how do you assert your power in any meaningful way? How do you exert any control over your own autonomy, much less over like the empire that you are a tiny appendage of? And what these books do is they show how LaSalle does that. And it's small things, it's little things, it's very subtle, but like the schemers back on Mahit's home station are good schemers. Like they have like plans and they have good ideas and they have like ways to sort of, maintain their limited independence. And it's a really, like, I think, when we're talking about the relationship of empire, cultural expropriation, colonialism, I think one of the most interesting things to me is like how the colonized continue to exist, continue to exert their own independence in ways that are not simply like, I mean, obviously we love a like colonial uprising, throw off the chains for your oppressors. But if you can't do that, well, what are your options? And these books are really, really interesting.
It is. I think it's an overlooked part of history in that there's a lot of stories about places that are colonized directly and the empires that colonize them. But basically every empire is littered, right, with these states that continue on as long as any state, can be expected to continue, right? No empire, no state lasts forever, but some of these last a really long time. Armenia is, I think, the example. But, there's also the Cherokee polity on the edge of the British and Spanish empires between the two of them, the Kingdom of Siam in Southeast Asia, the Kingdom of Hawaii, with no technological power compared to the imperial rivals, right? They survived for hundreds or, sometimes almost 1,000 years. It's really cool.
Speaking of the Mexica, there's a handful of Mayan city-states in like the Yucatan that, they're small, but they retain independence, through the Spanish colonial period, for hundreds of years and are eventually conquered and subsumed. But, through a combination of like diplomacy and just like being too difficult to conquer, managed to maintain independence. And yeah, Matt named a ton, but there's, from small cities all the way up to like, in entire kingdoms, managed to, through a combination of like arms and diplomacy and trade, among other things, cultural value, managed to stay independent. And this is really, really interesting. I agree with Matt that this is something that doesn't get enough attention in historical studies because it's complicated, but I think it is really
Speaking of, yeah.
I mean, sorry, Byzantium is by itself an example of this. Like, it persisted for a long time, a couple hundred years, basically, on the edge of, the Ottomans or, other like
Seljuks,
Mongols, Turkish invasion. surviving through a combination of diplomacy, intermarriage, relationships
Cultural
with European
power.
states, having big walls, ships, and
making deals
couldn't last
with
forever, but
everyone's like, oh man, the Genoese whatever
deals.
sacked it. Yeah, I mean they did, but it was a good deal for like a couple hundred years. Can you really say it was a bad deal? It worked for a long time. Yeah,
better than the alternative.
Speaking of
right?
Byzantium and the Aztecs or the Mexica, and let's talk about the empire at the heart of this story, because at least for the first book, this is where most of the interesting like world building comes from. And I also think, and maybe I'm going to say something stupid here, but this show's about putting out our stupid opinions here. It's really cool in a sci-fi book to see, I think, a really like medieval characterization of empire. And so the Teixcalaan,
I don't think that's stupid. I think that's
they're
great.
absolutely.
This is the premise at the heart of like science fantasy, right? Like why Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun is so beloved is because you go deep enough into science fiction, and I truly believe you become medieval again. Like I think that's an entirely like valid viewpoint, and I think Teixcalaan is a it's so big and powerful and creaky and archaic that it has become. Yeah,
and
medieval.
I mean, there's some things that are like eternal about empires. Like if they could ever overcome whatever internal contradictions, they could squash whatever spot they want like a bug, right? Like you see people or you have students ask you, well, like, why didn't Rome just conquer this place? It's like, well, okay, sometimes they couldn't. That's beyond their ability, but like they couldn't organize it, right? They couldn't convince the place that's so far away that this was actually important, right? The bigger problem was the succession crisis or something like that. And Teixcalaan is like that as well.
Right.
And
right.
I think it's an important but nuanced distinction to make is sometimes back, when I was teaching history on a daily basis to students, right? We used this word empire as a really big word, and it means different things in different places and different times with some overarching themes. And it's like, well, is it so bad what the Spanish Empire or the British Empire or the American Empire did? Like we've been talking about these empires the whole time. And I think one thing that this does well is just because they have like a more medieval approach doesn't mean they're not incredibly brutal, right? The Teixcalaan nuke planets. One of their generals has the eponym, the like mind breaker, and it's applied as in she broke the minds of an entire planet to the will of Teixcalaan. And like, it's also just like incredibly like nuanced as an empire, right? There are just so many people who don't think about the empire, of the people who do, some of them are clearly kind of nefarious, and others are just sort of nefarious.
I mean, I think this is part of the brilliance of the book, and what Matt is describing is great, is because all of what he's describing is all happening on the periphery, right? At the center of the empire, where all the action takes place, all of even the emperor and his viziers, they're all very urbane. They're very genteel. They're very educated. They sit around and they recite poetry and they have tea parties. And this isn't like there's cruelty, but like it's not like Darth Vader like choking people like on screen. Like there's very little like I'm witnessing an execution. Like, Arkady Martine doesn't like do you the favor of being like, these people are evil because they have like gladiator pit fights in the throne room. Like they're evil because their empire murders people, but it all happens at a great distance, right? Through layers and layers of, bureaucratic, acceptability, which is how real life empires function, right? Like it's very easy for us to like look at, if we want to like convince ourselves, the Romans were evil, like they fed Christians to the lions and all this, blah 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 blah.
Right.
But like
the Mexica, for example, took captives specifically for sacrifice.
Right?
Yeah.
And those things are evil, but like it is also evil. It's also horrible to exert massive violence and expropriation for the purposes of mining
getting
silver
rubber
from Potosi,
or whatever.
or rubber from the Congo. It's just not, vaudevillian, mustache twirling evil. But that's one of the things that I think is so brilliant about these books is there's a lot of very sympathetic Teixcalaan characters. They're many of our heroes and protagonists are from the heart of the Empire, and they are not evil people, but they are involved. They are complicit, right? And a big part of Mahit's character growth and conflict is how much does she want to participate, because she technically has a choice, right? She can go back to Lascelles and, I don't know, work in the iron mines. No, not that, but something a lot less interesting than being the ambassador. But then you're not a part of it, right?
Speaking of the one more example of its sort of more medieval reason that again still has echoes in modern empires is Teixcalaan as an empire is founded with a reason of conquest, right? They are, despite doing a lot of poets, right? They see themselves as warriors, right? Their emblem is rays of the sun that are spears. Flower and explosion are practically the same word, just like city and world and empire are all the same word. And they the urbane maybe kind of good guy emperor sixth direction, we see flashbacks of him with blood on his space laser spear as he's brutally killed a planet. And that's the contradiction of Empire. And I would say some of the modern things that you just throw in there too, because it's fun, is our protagonist sees random agitator protesting against war and expansion, random students who are organizing an anti-imperialist group, and it's okay, that's interesting. Doesn't really apply to me because I can tell these people can't stop anything that's happening now.
Right.
But
right.
Just a reminder that this is all there in the big contradiction that is Empire.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the end of a memory called Empire, so we can move on to a Desolation called Peace? Because
it's good. It's so good. We got to get to it. Yeah. So this book wraps up with our plucky ambassador and her best friend / frenemy / insane sexual tension haver.
Yes. I forgot to mention.
Oh yeah, this book's very gay.
If you like a queer romance. Yeah. And if you like a slow burn, this is the book for you.
Slowest burn, Jesus Christ!
It's a very slow burn. And this is also the reason why I think it works better as a duology, because you, for lack of a better term, you achieve satisfaction in the second book. You finally get the payoff, and it is, again, 2 books. It's a good slow burn. I really should emphasize I think the first book is really good. It is not there's not a lot of space battles. There's not a lot of things that happen. If you were expecting the same
couple of assassinations and explosions and chases,
but it's slow. These are slow books. I think they're 100% worth it. But adjust your expectations accordingly.
Read it if you want to complicate it. Learn how to structure a complicated political plot. But at the end of this complicated political plot, our plucky hero, Mahit, the ambassador, figures out through diplomacy, the power of poetry, and a little bit of the power of friendship, how to essentially redirect the forces of the Empire away from Lascelles Station. But it costs her in some of her friends and in the good Emperor Sixth Direction, who dies at the end of the book by his own hand. And there's a attempted coup. There's a rogue AI. There's a bunch of things we didn't have time to talk about that maybe aren't even fully developed. And then we're on to a Desolation called Peace, which I think is was first said. You call all the
you all make the desolation.
All the desolations are called peace that you don't take. Wayne Gretzky. No, it's Tacitus, right?
From Tacitus,
quoting
attributed
someone
to
else.
I think like a Pict chieftain or something, but it's a Tacitus quote. Really, yeah, you make a desolation and you call it peace.
So for people who are not interested in reading the second book differs from the first in that it's told from many characters' point of view, and it's about Empire versus another. It's a first contact book. There's some weird aliens out there, and they're very weird. The Empire and Lascelles Station have to deal with them. Most of your favorite characters from the first one end up in a space fleet dealing with this thing. And then they deal with it, ?
Yeah, I actually liked this better than the first book. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think maybe the first book was necessary to set this up. You know,
I just read the prologue, and like there's hints of everything that happens, which you won't notice until you've read all of them in the prologue.
Here's the thing. It's a more classic space opera. There are space battles. There are aliens. There's still scheming. There's still lots of intrigue. But I think it's just like a little bit more. It's a little bit easier to wrap your hands around like what's happening, because you don't have to be operating on, 3 layers of interpersonal thinking to really like follow it. But I love a first contact story, and this is a first contact story, and it really like leans on like what Martine is good at and what the first book is good at, which is language. And it's it's about a lot of things, but it's about how the fuck do we communicate with each other, but also how do we communicate with these aliens that seem to like differ from us on like a fundamental level, and that's all happening while there's some potential more coups possibly in the brewing.
There's always a coup brewing in Teixcalaan.
Always somebody trying to make a name for themselves. Yeah.
And there's for me, I really enjoyed being in the multiple memory headspace of our protagonist, Ambassador Mahat, and having to switch to some mostly new characters' point of view was a little disappointing at first, but the characters are so well developed and so cool. I quickly got over myself. And the second one, it's like, what if we could do a first contact scenario? And what if it's, which I think good sci-fi writers love to do, with an alien species that is truly alien to us? And how can we do that in a way that's just not totally incomprehensible to the reader? It's really well done, and as you can tell, one of the author's loves is languages. Guess what? The key to the first contact is about dealing with communication that is above language in some ways.
Well, and this is so interesting because it combines so many things. This is this alien empire, this alien entity is able to, if not like outright, defeat Teixcalaan in open battle, maybe, but they can at least challenge them. They're an actual threat to the Empire, which is not, all that common. And it's unclear why they're doing anything that they're doing, right? They're blowing up planets, they're destroying warp gates, they're, and it's again, classic first contact stuff, like, clear inability to communicate with these strange beings, and Mahit is sent with 3 seagrass and some others to figure this shit out. And all of the sort of like interesting stuff from the first book comes together to it all like sort of like percolates into a pretty like this one I thought really like moved along at like a really like brisk clip. I really liked a Desolation Called Peace. Some
of the cool things in this one, which is Space Armenia leads into being Space Armenia in that there are factions within the Space Armenian court or Council of Six that are like, well, clearly the solution here, Imago friends, is just have the 2 empires fight each other, which sometimes worked out for states like Armenia and sometimes didn't. It went very, very poorly. And this one seems that at least the implication from our heroine is that this will probably in the end up going poorly. But you understand why someone would think this.
Everyone's always trying to be a man with no name and a fistful of dollars,
Right.
you know, playing two sides against each other. But you are not Clint Eastwood, all right? It's easier said than done. This is a very, very difficult,
The easiest solution is to just shoot Clint Eastwood.
That's
It's
right.
not that
That's
hard.
exactly right. The problem with this,
Eventually, someone's
this,
going to realize that or just get bored. And
that's right. It only works if you are so good that nobody ever realizes, wait, I can just conquer Space Armenia or I can just shoot Clint Eastwood, because the moment somebody realizes that, the whole game is over, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but you understand, especially if you've been grading on the fact that all the teens on the station are like, doing
right.
Teixcalaan poetry rap battles with each other.
That's right. They're wearing that Teixcalaan blue jeans and listening to their Teixcalaan, rock music, and they've forgotten their LaSalle station roots. And yeah, you want the Empire to be, you want them out.
And again, I kind of said this before, but I'll say it again. Like, the way to make an interesting political situation for your players to solve is usually not to give two sides that want different things, right? Because then, it's just sort of it's the actual work of like some kind of diplomacy, which is not exciting storytelling. Instead, it's to give several factions within like at least one or preferably both of those sides, but one is fine. And navigating those and figuring out the plot is like the fun action bit of diplomacy, right? Because there's two sides to the empire. There's what the emperor wants, there's what the war ministry wants, there's what the war ministry intelligence department wants,
I mean, and this is, I think, the brilliance of the book is that there are no real villains, right? Like there are people you like more and people you like less, but like everybody has like understandable motives, and most of them are operating in some kind of self-interest, but all of them are, and this is actually, this is sort of a criticism, but it's a very mild one, because I have the same problem. Everyone's very clever. There are no stupid, like, evil people in any of these books.
No one makes decisions that are just like a dumbass, right? Which I think that's I think Martine must know this. There have been plenty of dumb fuck empires who are just bumbleheading about, and same with our empire too. But
we are living in a moment which I think should demonstrate to all of us that there are lots of people out there, many of them who are very powerful, who do not think or do not try to think or make decisions based on with inputs other than like what would be, in their self-interest, or what would look good, or what would like even gain them benefit. There are a lot of people with lots of power who are just firing from the hip, and who are driven by their base impulses or personal grievances, or the fact that their dick doesn't work or their dad didn't love them. And, here's the thing. I like to read books where everyone is smart and clever. And so I'm not mad that that's happening here. But you start to notice it, I think, like by that everybody is like very, very, they're not like hyper rational like Vulcans, but they are all, they are all thinking and reasoning and, approaching situations with a lot of nuance, which is fun to read. But is it realistic? ?
Yeah, I would say you're correct. I will push back and say, for the purposes of like, if you ever want to write a smart political situation, right? It's super easy to put in someone who's like, they're always going to push the button, right? You can clearly telegraph that character to your players. If you have characters or players who like to figure things out, writing all your characters to be like, well, these are the steps of logic that they have taken, and here are the clues and the things they'll tell you about that can be super satisfying, right? That big social puzzle.
As I have said, I enjoy this. I think it's good. I think it is much more. I'm one of those people who likes to figure it out and likes to like read into the nuance of things. I just, like Matt said, we have seen empires. We are exposed to empires that are not run this way, and whether or not that matters, or like it has to be like true to life, it is something that especially in this particular political moment, is always at the forefront of my mind.
I will say, like, one way to make the delicate balance of factions and players interesting is just make one of them the push the button person. And we kind of have that. Again, everyone is super smart, but there's a rival fleet admiral to one of our point of view characters. There's a rival fleet admiral to one of our point of view characters whose job is like, I'm going to start the war no matter what. Everyone's like, it's bad. And she's like, nah, I'm going to do it. And so, like, once you have that constraint, it's like it's a constant in your math equation you might let your players fuck with, you know?
Yeah.
And it helps them navigate. It's like, oh, we know this one person's going to do X. Now we can figure out what they'll do in response.
I did love the admiral that was just like, yeah, it's wartime. We're doing war. I'm going to do war on the aliens. And that was very like,
yeah.
I thought that was like both like a very like realistic character and like an interesting, it's kind of like a ticking clock that like everybody has to like work against. You know, we got to fix this problem before, you know, the admiral just starts a galactic war.
And of course, because it's Arkady Martine, we understand exactly why she's always going to do a war. Like, it goes back and we meet her boss or whatever.
Right,
it's like, hey, I raised this person to always do a war when I told them.
That's right.
You know,
this is built into her character.
Yeah, we need to be. We also need to be bailed out by Emperor 8. Ex Machina, who's back at base trying to stop the war from happening.
That's right.
As
that's
a
right.
precocious child.
Also, like a very interesting
go ahead.
viewpoint character, which I wasn't sure that I liked at first. But
Didn't like it first.
Being one of my favorites, yeah.
I was like, you know, reading this in the year that we're recording this podcast, I was also like, where are the dumb emperors? All the emperors we met, even as children, seem to be smart. Let's talk about the aliens, right?
Yes.
So I think. It's so funny throughout these books, because Arkady Martine is a historian. Every chapter begins with 2 snippets of fake documents that you would find in an archive, and it's just like such a historian move to do. And the documents read like stuff you would read in an archive.
Yeah.
Some of them are like super fascinating private journals, and others are like boring bureaucratic forms, and others are snippets of poetry. It's so good.
I love these epigraphs. Lots of science fiction fantasy does this, and I never get tired of it. It's one of my favorite little bits, and she is so good at it because she clearly has spent a lot of time in the archives and knows what.
There's some archive trauma that made these good. The aliens, which are never given a name because they don't think in language. They think in something beyond language. I understand this as some sort of psychic gestalt mind. But we discover as we go through things that they're in fact kind of big werewolf bothans, hairless bothans that are filled with mushrooms.
That's right. This is. I read a lot of science fiction. It is very hard to come up with like a new idea, and this isn't, I don't know, necessarily a new idea, but the brilliant thing to me, and this was such a huge payoff, and I felt way more satisfied at the end of A Desolation Called Peace than a Memory Called Empire, because I was like, oh, it all comes together. What a great, like, you know, was that like, yeah, no wonder you can't talk to them, because like the driver is this like spore fungus that's like in their brains, and like that's who you need to communicate with, not the like werewolf bothans. And it like requires them to like listen to, you know, a different frequency of blah blah blah.
Listen to music. They sing. I don't think I ever really understood why they sing.
I didn't understand it either, but it made sense at the end that like, oh, you can't talk to them because you're trying to communicate with like a mammalian creature, but like that's not who you're actually talking to. It is this gestalt like fungus mind that sings on like that sings somehow, and it doesn't sound like music that we know because they're fungus, but like we don't actually see like the like results of the first contact. We just sort of like get to the point where Mahit and
no one's
Seagrass
just killing everyone.
Yeah,
all the time.
They've figured out how to start talking, and then but it's like,
Rob,
I thought this was like really well done.
Yeah, I also we'll get back to the aliens, but I thought the ending of, they've started talking and maybe there's some kind of ceasefire for the moment. I was thinking back to my, Byzantine or Roman history. I'm like, yeah, but this will never last. How can these two empires exist beside each other without some war in the future? And I didn't really think it was like, this is a permanent peace. But maybe you got a different sense from the ending.
Well, I felt like no, I didn't think it was like a permanent peace, but it felt like it was going to stop short of an all-out like shooting war. But no, like LaSalle is not safe forever, and no, there's never going to be war. But like, the immediate crisis was prevented, which felt like pretty cool.
The other interesting thing is I think these aliens, first off, their like technology is weird. It's like in their claws. They like to disembowel things. The idea that the fungus lives in the brains of mammalian creatures, that maybe it's unclear if they would have full sapience without the fungus. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. I think you could, if you were ever using this as inspiration, play it either way. And I think, it would just make it makes for such good, if you want to do some kind of first contact scenario using the singing fungus werewolf aliens, you could not go more wrong. They have really sharp teeth too, to implant the fungus in people.
Right.
Or that happens by accident, actually, right? Maybe.
Yeah. But again, some of this stuff, and I don't know if this is because she's too smart for us, or if genuinely like it did need to be like better explained. It doesn't always like fully come together in a way that I understood either, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me that I don't like understand every single thing. It makes enough sense.
Well, here's the thing: is like you can either make aliens different valued human beings, right?
Right.
And you can understand.
You can do Planet
them,
of Hats.
Right? I can understand the Romulans, right? They're backstabbers. They're schemers, but they're essentially humans. Or you can make your aliens not fully understandable and therefore not fully like human and very weird. And if you pick the latter one in your game, then you don't have to explain everything.
You don't. They can just be weird. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't understand why they the other interesting thing is I think the key to these creatures, and there's some real Rob, I'm getting some mule vibes from the final couple chapters of you think about the mule? I'm always thinking about the mule.
I am always thinking about the mule, Matt.
Arkady Martine, the mule is our Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is...
The mule kind of is my Roman Empire. Sorry, this is neither here nor there.
Yeah. Does everyone know what the mule is?
Yeah, sorry. For listeners, there's what is it? It's Second Foundation, right, where he shows up. There's this...
Yeah.
One of the later Foundation books, it turns out that great Harry Seldon couldn't predict everything because there was a weird psychic mutant that nobody could have predicted, and his name is the Mule, and he conquers the universe, and he's fucks everything up, and I love the Mule. The Mule's one of the great characters of. He forms a Gestalt psychic consciousness with things too, I think. Yeah, right. Yeah. He bonds people to him with through psychic control. The Foundation show, which is great, but doesn't really it's not actually that close to Foundation. But the Mule has showed up briefly in flash forward sequence, and I literally did the Leonardo DiCaprio sitting up and pointing thing. I was like, "That's the Mule."
And that's the Mule.
That's the Mule. Anyway, but yes, I was thinking the same thing with these aliens. It's something's going on with bonding and creating a psychic, some kind of quantum consciousness. I don't know.
Right, because the Empire experiments with this with their terrifying police force and with their starfighter jockeys who signed up to be cool space pilots like Starbuck, and they end up being uber traumatized by accidentally feeling everyone they've ever loved die.
Oh, I forgot about this part. Yeah. There's all these cool starfighter pilots that are very Battlestar Galactica, jockeys in their like neat, and they're just like exposed to these like horrible like songs and emotions and
they're all
and
sort of they're like precog linked so that they can feel each other's reactions, so they can fly in formation better together. But then
which
now
is cool, which is neat. Yeah.
The bad thing is they start getting one person dies, the people near them feel their death, and then those people feel their feeling, and like it starts cascades through them. So you got a bunch of sad fighter pilots. It's kind of funny.
Honestly, it's kind of funny. It's kind of horrible. Yeah,
it's terrifying, funny, and then of course the Imagos of the Lascelles station also pass and share memories in a completely different way, and this ends up being a little bit of the bridge that's gonna maybe help humans connect with these aliens.
Yeah.
There's also, speaking of weird aliens, I think it's only really mentioned in passing and in some of the opening documents to chapters. But there's like one other intelligent alien species that that are not humans, that are like big wolf people that communicate through running, and you have to run and like talk to them or something like that.
That's right. There's just like little hints of other things. And this is a thing that I recommend, and all of my favorite fantasy and science fiction books do this, is leave some room for imagination, right? Like don't explain everything, don't draw every single border of the empire. And there's enough going on with Teixcalaan, do you make you wonder, like, what else is out there? And there's at least some other aliens.
Right. We're also so I thought this is incredibly hard to do, but if you're looking for this for your world, this is one of the only examples I can think of, besides things like Foundation, is there's humans everywhere on all these different planets. There are no references. I started watching for it to Earth, human, current, contemporary English expressions, or Earth history. All of that is so far in the past. And if you're like, well, that's crazy, that would never happen. It's like, well, I mean, I guess think of it from the Romans' perspective or the Byzantines' perspective. It's like there are humans all over the planet. No one remembers or has any knowledge of how they migrated there. That's like the situation of classical and medieval people. Hey, there's humans. They're kind of like us. Are they like us? Let's find out. Let's kill them. But like no one remembers the like migrations from out of East Africa to the rest of the planet.
I mean, this is one of the points that the Davids are always making in The Dawn of Everything. But like human history is 200,000 years old. Like
250 maybe.
Yeah, we didn't write that down, but like that's history. Things happened, right? Lots of things happened. Many generations existed, and it is both hard, but like not that hard to imagine, like far enough in the future that like, sure, maybe deep in an archive somewhere, assuming that this is Earth, there's like a reference to Earth or like where we all came from, but like the same way that only like hyper nerd anthropologist archaeologists are going to know about like the cave dwellings on the shores of East Africa, like probably not that many people in Teixcalaan know about Earth. I buy that. That makes sense to me.
No one appears to know about Earth. The people from Lascelles Station knew their station wasn't always there, that it was built by someone, and that they were running from something, but no one knows why. Or, they know they got there approximately this many Imagos ago. But like, there's nothing before that. And so, that's not unusual, like for a people actually that, it's like, a lot of people have, stories of like, hey, we once lived over there. We kind of, no one wrote down or didn't think it was important at the time to write down why we left.
I mean, we are very lucky to live in a moment of historical continuity, but it's in human history like pretty rare. And I don't want to be like a doomer about this, but like I don't know that it's going to be the case forever, right? Like, especially since so much of our information is now stored digitally, and digital information does not persist in the same way that even a book does. We may encounter periods in the future. It's not hard to imagine.
This could be a dark age in terms of
not
sources.
remembering or not knowing lots of things that happened, even though we could have recorded them. Yeah.
Here's the thing: is that nothing lasts forever, and this actually makes a ton of sense, and it's very different than like Dune. Right, Dune. There's all these references to Earth cultures that were, Rob and I are both practicing Zen Sunnis.
Yeah,
but in the
I still have my Orange Catholic Bible, and
right. Rob's an Orange Catholic. I'm a Zen Sunni. How will we ever make this podcast work?
But yeah, I mean, Dune takes the other route where Earth is so far in the past that everything is warped, beyond recognition, but it is still recognizably Earth-based. But you can do it. Both are hard to do, right? Both are hard to do well, and I do like this a lot about Martine's books.
Yeah, you gotta. It's really hard. I imagine as a writer, maybe it's not hard as a smart writer like Arkady Martine, but to strip your language of the casual reference or stand-in for something. But there I guess the only hints are they're like horses and stuff. There's a space kitten. It's kind of adorable.
That's right. That's right.
What else do we want to say? What other lessons can Dungeon Masters take from this duology, adding it to our book club?
Quickly here at the end, I think that the big thing to take away and to learn from these books is how to. There's so much cool stuff going on. The world building is second to none, and it's unique, and that makes it worth reading. But these are masterclasses in intrigue and sort of social political dynamics. If you want to write interesting characters in if you want to do any palace intrigue, if you want to do any sort of political machinations, if you want to have plots that are a little bit more complicated than somebody wants to stab the king in the night, this is a great book to read, right? It gives you tons of people with competing motivations and ways to go about achieving what they want that are more sophisticated than just brute violence or whatever. These are great books for developing more nuanced characters, and especially social dynamics they're gonna make your characters make your players make some difficult decisions, who do we side with. All these people want something, none of them are on our side, but we need their help. Yeah.
I think both books follow a similar structure in terms of the final plot that is useful for role-playing games, which is after your players have mucked about and had their fun and explored the new world and encountered new cultures and stuff like that, you set something in motion, but you give the players essentially the ticking clock and what will happen if they do nothing, and then see them try and alter or steer that course. In the first book, it's very clear that there's going to be a coup, and that the person who wins the coup will be I am going to fuck up a new place. The spear must be bloodied as the 1,000 shining rays of Teixcalaan point outwards. And even if the coup fails, the emperor will be pushed by said thing to do new contacts, and Lascelles next on the chopping block. Okay, we got to do something. Mm-hmm. Same in the second book, right? We know there's a ticking time bomb. We can see that fleet. It is moving towards that planet, and they're gonna I can't imagine living in an empire that would wipe out an entire populated civilian place with nuclear bombs, but Teixcalaan is going to do that. How crazy must it be to live in such a place? But yeah, that is happening, and the players have to stop.
How awful would it be to live in an empire like that? Yeah,
right. It's almost they just sort of said that happened a long time ago, and I guess we can't really deal with the continuing historical weight of that, and so we just be wow, that happened. That's basically how the Teixcalaan deal with it.
It's just like, oops, that happened.
We don't do that
moving on.
anymore.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's all.
Meanwhile, one of our general, the Mind Breaker. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
That's
give her
right.
a triumph in the So give your players like, okay, after you faff about, here is the thing that is like it's really fun to tell your players what is going to happen, right?
Mhm.
And then let them change it how they see fit.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, the ticking clock focuses them, but like gives them lots of ways to approach the situation.
And then because this is our first sci-fi book for the DM book club, don't be afraid to throw in weird AI that maybe never gets resolved or explained, or mutants or clones. Just, these things are mentioned, and some are slightly important, none are super important. How do people get between the stars? Ring gates. Where'd they come from? The ring gates? It's like asking where the stars came from. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
I mean,
wave away the things you don't want to deal with something cool and weird.
Yeah. I was just doing some prep for a Mothership game, and it's got great advice about this. Like, lean into the tech. You don't have to have an answer for everything. You can just say science. Do as much as you know. Offload it to players who are into science if you want. Be like, I don't know, where do you guys think the ring gates came from? That's a perfect, like, this is the joke about like Star Trek, but like, they would just write like technobabble in the script and then, fill it in later. That is a perfectly valid way to be like, okay, I want there to be an AI, or I want them to be killer robots or ring gates or, mind link devices, but I don't know how they work. Whatever. Step one is like, here's the cool idea. Later, you can deal with the how.
Yeah, I think sci-fi games are particular, especially like these big space opera sci-fi games, or if we're putting something weird, right? The police show up and they all talk in unison, and you can't see their faces. Are they humans? Are they robots? Are they like, lobotomized humans that are linked together with digital robots? You don't know yet. Let your players speculate, and then, maybe when it's relevant, you can write down what the answer is.
Yeah.
The technobabble like this, like a ring gate or like, the weird robots, is the mystery, like magic of sci-fi, right? It's the thing that's like, that is interesting to explore, because we don't have one of those, back home. All we got's McDonald's.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I could talk about this all night, but I think we should wrap it up. Any final thoughts about this?
Well, it's been a while since we've done a DM of None Dungeon Master book club. I've loved all the books that we've talked about. We generally only pick books that we either really, really like, or like parts of so much that they're really fun to talk about. I'm glad we have finally done a sci-fi one.
Me too.
I highly recommend reading this just for enjoyment, for sci-fi, or honestly, the stuff about empire and language and is universal to your weird alien fungus things could be fae from another world if you're playing a fantasy game. So I recommend this for everyone. Check it out.
Yeah. All right. If you have other suggestions for us,
listen to a Nahuatl. I can't do it. Speaker, like, Google or search for someone speaking Nahuatl, so that you can get a little bit of a handle, because the first one's got a lot of words inspired by that language, and that might be the only barrier.
If you like this, if you have suggestions for us, please let us know.
Yeah, specifically suggestions for the next book club entry.
Take us another year to get to it. Maybe not. Actually, I could read another. There's lots that are on my list. This reminded me of a bunch of other Hugo winners I read around the same time. But I hope you enjoyed this. We love doing this, and these are great books. Highly recommended. Very fun. Very interesting. Totally worth the hype. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah. And this is a reminder that inside the prisms, as our heroine says and her imago says, inside the prism of both language, culture, and empire, you are never truly free.
Keep rolling them dice.
Embrace the mule.